This is the
Five Stars
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
That's right. Even Brian Alvarez agrees this show is 5 stars. What was not 5 stars this week was AEW's material, but we'll surely get into that in a little while. Stay tuned. In fact, all 3 shows I watched this week were well below 5 stars. Particularly NWA, which left me absolutely dumbfounded by the end. Actually made me wonder for a minute if I was watching that show in a parallel universe, but it would seem that I was not. I don't know, expected their television product to reflect their upcoming pay-per-view card, but again, I'll dive to that a little later on. Anyway, yes, you are all tuning into the 5 Starr Wrestling Report podcast, where each week here on YouTube and Rumble, we bring you 2 podcast episodes covering all sorts of wrestling content. And as early as Friday, I would have been able to lay out the consistent format for our 2 shows, but we're going to wipe the slate clean for a minute here and sort of hit the reset button. So if you've been watching the show consistently, first of all, thank you for sticking around. I definitely appreciate the support. If you are tuning in for the first time, make sure you subscribe, comment, and rate the show for me. Commenting being the most imperative thing you could do to help the show out in the algorithms here, especially on YouTube and their setup to fail system in 2021 if you aren't a top-tier content creator. Anyway, we do Monday and Friday shows here where we cover recaps of various wrestling content. Monday's show typically consisted of recaps of AEW Rampage, NWA Power, and weekend pay-per-view events and news stories. And Friday's show was the recap show for NXT and AEW Dynamite. And if you've been watching the shows over the last month, you'll also know that the G1 Climax 31 coverage was also a part of both shows. And I guess on the surface I thoroughly enjoyed that, but now that the G1 is over and now that my threshold for suffering through NXT has about reached its max capacity, I've decided to do a little bit of restructuring going forward, mainly for the Friday show. So we are going to have 2 shows each week, Mondays and Fridays. That will not change. However, what we're going to dedicate the Friday show to is going to be a little different now. Instead of reviewing NXT, in addition to reviewing AEW Dynamite, we're also going to treat that show as a classic content or retro review series show for NWA World Championship Wrestling studio shows, beginning right at the top of the library that they have with the content on the Peacock Network right now, that being the November 2nd, 1985 edition, which will work out perfectly in line with where we are right now with the channel and with the dates, actually. And on that same show, I am also going to cover World Class Championship Wrestling beginning around the same month of November, but instead of starting in 1985, I'm going to start that review series in 1982, where World Class really began to take off and gain traction across the nation in that sort of territorial product state. Monday's show will relatively stay similar, with the focus of that show being AEW Rampage, NWA Power, and weekend pay-per-views. However, in the cases where there isn't a weekend event or pay-per-view to talk about, what I would like to do is dedicate a section of that show to analyzing some of my article content for the Chairshot and just, try to provide some in-depth analysis for what I'm currently writing at that point. It'll be a chance for me to sort of elaborate on my work and try and stir up some conversation. So, a little bit of shameless plugging, but, it also is another talking point that we can address on the program. So, that'll be the plan going forward after this week. So, basically, long story short, you can expect NXT to be scrapped from the weekly discussion, and you can expect some classic content to take place in the form of NWA and WCCW. And hopefully that'll be a better use of time, energy, and resources. Speaking of the Chairshot content, you guys can head over right now to www.chairshot.com to get a look at my weekly publications that get uploaded for the site. I write opinion articles each week on various news topics and stories from all realms of the wrestling market. Trying to provide a different perspective on these stories and get people to really deep dive and think about these subjects in detail. So if you have a few minutes to spare, I highly encourage you to head on over to the Chairshot, click under that opinion tab, and my work will always be labeled under the name Star. All reads are within 600 to 1,000 words, to make sure I'm not boring you with all the content, but they're still worth the look, and if you enjoy opinion content and like hearing different perspectives on things, I think you'll find them insightful. And as always, I will be sure to leave a link to my most recent publication in the description so you can gain easy access. And I do have my next article planned. I will probably end up writing that tomorrow, and then I will leave a link for that newest publication for Friday's edition. And with all the plugs out of the way, I think we're ready to get going with the show. As noted in previous podcasts as well, with Dynamite taking place on Saturday the last couple weeks, that did sort of throw off the usual schedule with keeping Dynamite booked for the Friday show. But after this edition, we will get back to the normal schedule with Dynamite recaps taking place on the Friday shows once they get back to their Wednesday format for their schedule. But before we get there, let's sort of take it from the top, and we'll start with Rampage from October 22nd, 2021. We begin with the first round in this AEW World Title Eliminator Tournament. It's Orange Cassidy versus Powerhouse Hobbs. And yes, it would appear that Orange Cassidy is ranked number 2 at the moment, which I thought was insulting in and of itself. And then they had the gall to show a replay from a match from the previous year where apparently Orange Cassidy had beat Powerhouse Hobbs in like 12 seconds or something on television. What the hell has happened to pro wrestling? Anyway, I pretty much went in here wanting one thing, and that was for Powerhouse Hobbs to go over. Apparently my request was too demanding to our Lord and Savior Tony Khan and his genius booking committee. I mean, I figured it'd make rational sense, right? Hobbs is a machine, he looks legit, he's actually kind of been built up well over the last year. He's 10 times the star potential of anything Orange Cassidy's capable of ever reaching. Plus, Cassidy already went in with an injured rib, so you figure you have an out if you wanted to protect him, God forbid. But no, apparently the alleged Booker of the Year still has a hard-on for this Orange Cassidy guy, so gotta sacrifice the guy with all the tools to get over the comedy mid-card gimmick that only appeals to the hardcore schlong suckers. I mean, that's all I really have to say about it. The match was literally just Hobbs beating on Cassidy until the finish, where the testosterone-deficient referee butted in while Hobbs had Cassidy in the corner and kept threatening to DQ him. And of course, Taz is on commentary like, what the fuck's the ref's problem? Finally, Hobbs has enough of Remsburg's dumbass, so he picked him up and carried him over to the opposite corner where they engaged in dialogue. And fast forward 20 seconds later, Cassidy gets the flash pin and wins. Because apparently it's ever so important that we see Orange Cassidy versus Jon Moxley in the second round. Yeah, not doing something productive like having Hobbs steamroll his way to the finals, wrestle Bryan Danielson at the pay-per-view, which would give Hobbs a pay-per-view slot, mind you. And at least Hobbs losing to Danielson would help elevate Hobbs' profile in some way. Who am I to criticize the greatest booker in the wrestling business today? So after that complete and total farce, Tony Schiavone brought out Penta and... Oh God, I can never pronounce his name. Abrahantes? Anyway, they came out to try and cut a promo. No idea where Phoenix was, by the way. But about less than 5 seconds into the dialogue, two conveniently placed plants in the front row with green masks, the same ones that FTR wrestled in last week, they show up. Not even in full gear, mind you, just the masks. And, of course, because the babyfaces are idiots and apparently can't decipher height and physique differences between these guys and FTR, they go over to pull the masks off and get immediately jumped by the heels.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Not really. In fact, this was so amateur and bush league, I actually had to check my DVR to make sure I recorded AEW and wasn't watching a rerun of Raw or something. Booker of the Year, ladies and gents. And it was right about this point where it hit me, oh, I see what they're doing. They're going to have FTR get the better of the Lucha Bros all the way up until Full Gear so that they can do a job for them. Fantastic. Hey, at least I'll get to see FTR work a pay-per-view match and maybe even drag out a good pay-per-view match out of the Lucha Bros. So, I'll take what I can get at this point. Then we had Anna Jay and Britt Baker in a match. They did some very awkward-looking wrestling for a while. Anna's very clunky. In fact, everything she did in this match felt like I was watching her in slow motion. And I like Britt Baker and all, but she is still nowhere near the level of a Thunder Rosa to be able to cover up for the green talent she's working with. Bad women's match. I mean, I don't know how many different ways I can regurgitate that every week on this show. Oh, and Britt won, by the way, if you care at all. Somewhere in here, we got a rapid series of pre-tapes and match announcements, including the revealing of the brackets for this TBS Women's Championship tournament. And the only thing I really got out of it is that it is a 12-person tournament. Thunder Rosa, Nyla Rose, Chris Statlander, and Jade Cargill all get first-round buys. I guess because they're the top ranked in the division right now, which I guess makes sense. And it also features Red Velvet, The Bunny, and Penelope Ford. So brace yourself there. By the way, I just thought this was kind of funny, so I had to write it down. And I literally only noticed this because Riho wasn't anywhere in the brackets here. Y'all remember when Riho was like rammed down our throats every week on AEW because her and Kenny Omega were bonking one another in the back? First AEW Women's Champion. Wasn't she like undefeated for a long period of time too? She is now a total afterthought on this program. I mean, I really have nothing more to add about it. I just thought it was funny. And that brought us to our main event of Andrade El Idolo versus Pissed Off Pac. Honestly, I kind of like that nickname over the Bastard. And honestly, the worst thing that I could say about this was the pre-tape they aired beforehand, which, once again, WWE can never fucking figure it out with this guy, and AEW apparently can't get the message either. They let Andrade talk. Why? No, seriously, why? Why is this man allowed to ever say anything on live national television? His promos suck. They've always sucked. That's why for the majority of his career that he was given a mouthpiece to talk for him. What the fuck is the point of that Ambrahantes guy if Andrade just ends up doing his own dialogue? Come to think of it, I thought that's why they brought Chavo in. Where the hell is he at? I remember they did the angle after the first Pac Andrade match where he laid out Chavo and then the Death Triangle killed him in the ring after Pac put him in the Brutalizer. But whatever. To say I have never been a particular fan of Andrade's booking in AEW would be putting it mildly. Anyway, discounting my rant about that, they had the match, or rematch, I guess it would be more accurate. Fuck, dude, if this match would have just been a 60-minute Iron Man match, it would have been the best episode of Rampage yet. Generally, I'd say I enjoyed the first match they had, but that was more so ruined by the bad finish. With the steps here being that everyone was banned from ringside, I immediately paid more attention to it because at least I knew I could watch the match without having to anticipate run-ins or cheap finishes. Pac is so underrated, dude. Like, I know he's not the biggest guy in the world from a size point of view, but if I ever ran a small wrestling company and I needed like a top heel to, build my babyface challengers around, Pac's my dude. He's built like an athlete. He's extremely tense, carries himself like a star. He can talk, he can work. He's got the facials down packed. Like, that's a top heel champion right there. It's a damn shame that we'll probably never see Pac as AEW World Champion. Honestly, looking back at it in hindsight, I probably would have made a better argument. He could have made a first heel champion over Chris Jericho. May have even been more suitable. I mean, here's the other thing too. Like, you really think about it for a sec, if you actually kind of follow the career of Pac, this is a guy that can work with pretty much anyone and get a good match out of him. Like, Christ, he had 2 fantastic matches with Kenny Omega of all people. Most guys would be lucky to get 1 good match out of that guy, much less 2. Anyway, there was a lot that happened here, but basically they worked it as a back and forth, knockdown, drag out street fight. And don't mistake my criticism of Andrade as me completely neglecting the guy as a talent. I never said the dude couldn't work, I just said his promos are the shits. But like, the stuff Andrade can pull off in the ring is just mind-boggling at times. Like the spot he did, and I don't even know if this was some kind of miscue or botch, but whatever they did, I mean, they covered up for it and it looked great. Andrade whipped Pac into the corner, and Pac goes to do the slingshot over to the apron, but as Andrade's running at him with the boot, he actually ends up grazing Pac in the head with the boot anyway. Like, I've never seen that before, and whether it was intended to happen or not, it looked good. And obviously there was the spot toward the end of the match where Andrade did that slingshot DDT to Pac on the apron while he was hanging in the ropes, and both guys looked like they died. I guess my only real gripe about the flashy stuff Andrade does is that I really shouldn't be seeing him do that stuff as a heel. I absolutely love that running corkscrew dive he does off the turnbuckle where he does the full body rotation and lands on the guy on the outside. It looks great and totally safe, but he'd get so much more mileage out of that if he just did it as a babyface. Pac did a very safe-looking top rope brainbuster, which probably should have been the finish, but, I also understand the reality of the business we're in now where guys have to kick out of everything, so it is what it is. And they end up trading some slaps at the end, went back and forth with kicks and strikes until finally Andrade goes for the hammerlock DDT, but Pac cradles that into a small package and wins, at which point the lights immediately go out, and when they come back on, Malachi Black shows up and missed Pac in the face. And yes, I should probably deduct points from both guys for immediately no-selling everything from the match. They just worked, but it's AEW, so I have to grade it on a curve. Anyway, so heels beat down Pac for a minute. Black goes to grab a chair, and that is when Armed Anderson comes down, points the artificial Glock at Andrade, points the artificial Glock at Malachi, and Cody runs in to make the save for Pac, and all the heels skedaddle while they pump up the Cody Black 3 match for Dynamite the next night. And, I could easily knock this for them taking the shine away from the Pac Andrade match, but this was interesting in the sense that I already kind of went in figuring Black was doing a job to Cody on Dynamite, but with the misdeal, it gave me the impression that they were already kind of launching into Black's next program with Pac, which I certainly wouldn't complain about if they decided they want to go that direction. And now that I think about it, Black and Pac, man, that's a feud that just kind of rolls off the tongue, isn't it? So, while I wasn't a fan of the Pac Andrade finish immediately getting swept aside for the afterbirth, at least we got a clean finish. And it is good to know that they're actively trying to set up Black for his next program, if that indeed is the intent. Although it, again, makes you wonder why they made the decision they did the following night on Dynamite, but I'll get to that in a minute. Or, maybe it just leads to a one-off TV match, which would kind of be disappointing, but, is what it is. And like I said at the beginning of the segment, if this show was just an hour showcase of Pac and Andrade wrestling, I would have coined this the best episode of Rampage yet. Unfortunately, I had to watch 30-plus minutes of the stuff beforehand that really didn't do a whole lot for me. I hated the finish to Hobbs and Cassidy. The Lucha Bros skit was straight out of a bad episode of Raw. And the women's match was a women's match. Main event was really the only thing worth checking out, and, it was good enough to make up for the other material on the show. It was interesting, though. There was not a single appearance from Punk here, who, well, at least I thought was quickly adopting the moniker of Mr. Rampage, but he made no appearance on the show. Didn't even do commentary. Interesting call. Almost as if they have no idea what to do with him. Anyway, moving along with Dynamite here. And how I managed to get through 3 hours of AEW in a 2-day sitting, your guess is as good as mine. Although I know there are a good chunk of you numbskulls out there that try and watch all of AEW's content, including the dark shows and all the YouTube material. You all must have a high threshold for pain. That's all I'm going to say about that. Opening match was Bryan Danielson versus Dustin Rhodes in the Eliminator Tournament. First part of my notes here, I just thought this was worth mentioning. Get a brief laugh out of the one kid in the crowd that screamed, "Bryan sucks." Happened real early on in the match, but it was audible enough to get picked up on the live audio during the point where the crowd was probably the most quiet during the match. Perfect timing. Aside from that one moment of comedy, I love the match. I don't think I'll share anything here that won't already get covered by other media outlets, but I already kind of figured I would enjoy the match when they first announced it, and I was not disappointed. I wouldn't say this was on par with Team Hell No, Rhodes Family stuff these guys did in WWE years ago, but it was a great TV match. I like the story they played up early on where Dustin was really trying to keep the pace slower and almost working with the idea that he was hesitant to go after Bryan, wasn't really sure how to mesh with him. And, of course they picked up the pace as the match went along, but it was the exact kind of wrestling match that I would expect two experienced workers in the business to put on. They weren't concerned about getting their shit in. They weren't trying to pop the crowd with stupid-looking dives or flip bumps. They set an initial pace. They worked that effective story, and they actually took their time and built to the climax. There was an absolutely beautiful-looking top rope superplex that Dustin did to Bryan that may have been the best superplex I've ever seen now that I think about it, and I've seen a lot of Bobby Eaton superplexes in my time. We did get a pile driver here at one point, which unfortunately was not the finish, but I will at least say this. If there is one guy in the business that I would undoubtedly trust taking a pile driver from, it's Dustin. And yeah, I know I spent a lot of time talking about how Pac can pretty much get a good match out of everyone. I think it should be a requirement that every young guy in this company works a pro wrestling match with Dustin at some point. Keyword there being pro wrestling. Anyway, They did some false finishes at the end, which actually felt warranted given the story they were telling. And after Dustin's big flurry of offense, Bryan ended up grabbing a hold of the guillotine choke and forced Dustin to pass out. Oh, and I guess I should point that out too. Another little side story they were playing up here. They're kind of going with the idea of Bryan using different ways to win his matches in AEW. Kind of similar, actually, to what they were doing with Zack Sabre Jr. in the G1, where he kept managing to find different submission holds to beat his opponents, but he never reverted back to the same finish over and over again. And I kind of like that idea here with Bryan, too. It paints the idea that Bryan has enough offensive leverage to keep his opponents on their toes, never knowing what Bryan might pull out to win. Yeah, very good stuff here. My God, man, Dustin's what, 50 years old now? He doesn't look a day over 30 with how he's been wrestling over the last 2 years. The crap that guy's been through with his wrestling and personal life. I mean, you want to talk about the ultimate redemption story. Take a look at Dustin Rhodes' career. That's a real inspirational story right there. Moving along here, we got admittedly so, it was an Elite promo, but it was not completely intolerable for a change. Basically, Kenny Omega just did a promo on Hangman Adam Page and tells him he knows him like the back of his hand, which is why he's going to beat him at the pay-per-view. We did get the goofy bad heel line at the end where Omega says that after he beats Page, people won't be chanting cowboy shit, they'll be chanting coward shit. And of course they're all like, ooh, good one, good line, man. Now that, I will admit, that is a rare example of the Elite doing bad, stupid comedy, but it actually being entertaining bad comedy. I can get behind the Elite dropping hokey one-liners as long as they don't overstate it. Oh, and for the record, too, the Beta Bucks standing in the background like dorks and being complete afterthoughts, much better than having to hear them talk. Oh, yeah, and I guess I should mention this. Tony Nese was shown in the crowd. Tony Nese, huh? Great. Another generic-looking indie guy with no personality. He'll blend right in with this roster. Hell, sign him up. Why not? Brief FTR deal where they basically said they're going to become AEW Tag Champions at Full Gear. I'll believe it when I see it. Then we had Tony Schiavone bringing out Sting to provide an update on Darby Allin, but instead we got MJF interrupt to, once again showcase why he's arguably the best person on the mic in the business today. Maybe you throw Eddie Kingston into the mix as well. But took a few minutes to run down Sting in the Florida crowd. Started blaming Sting for Darby being in the state he's in because Sting has a track record of stabbing his friends in the back and leaving them high and dry, just like he did to Lex Luger. And now Lex is in a wheelchair because of it. So, of course, Sting pops him in the jaw and starts going ham until Shawn Spears and Wardlow run out for the save. And we did get a brief flurry of offense from the young up-and-coming Stinger, right before that numbers advantage caught up. So heels lay him out with the chair shots. MJF sets the chair down and grabs Sting by the neck, says if Darby comes back, he's dead meat. And then MJF clocks Sting in the head with a diamond ring just to be a dick. A classic heat segment. Almost kind of made me wish we didn't see these kinds of skits every week on the show. Otherwise, it might have felt more impactful. But I'm definitely looking forward to that MJF Darby match, if it ends up happening at the pay-per-view, which I presume it will. Well, I guess someone from management heard my drinking game challenge last week from the AEW backstage skit deal and said, hey, kid's got a point. Maybe we should not end every segment in a mass brawl. Good to know my opinion matters. Anyway, Britt Baker did a quick promo with Tony on her up-and-coming title match against Ty Conti at the pay-per-view, which can't really say I'm eager to see that, but I am going to need a piss break at some point or another on that show. Okay, seriously, real talk for a minute. I'm not trying to be a hard ass about this. I'm really not. Tony, booking crew, whoever is overseeing the cards for these shows, what is with the obsession of having Penelope Ford wrestle every week? She sucks. She's always sucked as a pro wrestler. Maybe in time, she'll get better. Although I highly doubt it. But until that day comes, Penelope should not be on national television. Do you want her to wrestle in front of crowds? Put her on dark. She should not be on your 2 premiere shows, especially if you're going to put her in longer matches where she's having to be competitive. All that does is drag her opponents down to her level. The best thing Penelope has ever done in AEW is be a ringside valet. And as much as I will never advocate to see his pudgy ass on my TV screen ever again, Penelope being Joey Janela's eye candy was much more preferable than watching her work botchy, awkward matches every week. And that included this one here with Ruby Riott, which, the only good thing I'll say about it is Ruby won. With a roll-up, yes, and that was flat out dumb, but whatever, she won. Please stop making me watch Penelope Ford matches. You got plenty of other female talent that are better than her. And we all know how much I complain about how terrible AEW's women's division is. But there are much more suitified and qualified workers than her. I would highly suggest you feature them. So then we had this pinnacle skit with MJF, Shawn Spears, and Wardlow, which ended up actually being unintentionally funny by the end. Basically, Wardlow got in MJF's face, telling him to explain the whole deal from last week where he threw Wardlow into Sting to take the bullet for him. Of course, MJF does the slimy greaseball cop-out answer and, says it was the heat of the moment, yada yada. And he says that he knows how hard Wardlow's job is, so he has hired Shawn Spears to look after him as his accountability buddy. And this is a pretty dumb skit on the surface, but the comedic point came right at the end where after MJF leaves, Shawn looks up at Wardlow and just goes, "Hey." And come to think of it, that might have been the greatest moment of Shawn's career since the 10 gimmick. Bobby Fish wrestled a quick squash against Anthony Green, who was just kind of there. Although I cannot say the same for Green's neck after taking that overhead throw into the ropes. Jesus, let that look brutal. Anyway, they did a quick afterbirth deal where Bobby was beating down Green after the bell, and eventually CM Punk ran out to make the save, which JR accurately pointed out that it actually took the people a minute to figure out it was Punk. Yeah. So, just so we're staying consistent with the timeline here, we've gone from a great Pro Wrestling Return promo to a very solid pay-per-view match with Darby Allin to a couple decent TV matches with undercard guys to now Punk is doing run-ins in the middle of Dynamite and the people don't even recognize it's him because he's dressed in generic-looking street clothes. 2 months. We are 2 months into this Punk Love Fest return, and he is already just another guy on the show. Which further validates my ongoing belief that, yes, they indeed signed CM Punk to a contract so they could do a dream match with him and Darby, and now they have no idea what to do with him. You got an excuse for that one? Tony? Fans? Anyone? You gonna try and defend Booker of the Year on that one? So then we had Eddie Kingston versus Lance Archer in the next first round eliminator match. And for some reason, we had a babyface jumping the heel angle beforehand with Eddie getting one over on Archer for some reason. And that all eventually led to the evident, oh, let me grab this conveniently located plant in the front row to use him as a human weapon spot that Archer always does. And, Well, from that point, they proceeded to break down into a wrestling match, as Brian Alvarez used to say during his TNA rants from back in the day. Actually, no, I'm taking that out of context. I think it was usually the standard deal in tag matches in TNA where they would do the mass brawl beforehand, and then they would decide to play by the rules and work a standard tag match. Anyway, the match was pretty generic. Archer and Kingston are just kind of guys at this point on the roster, so it's really hard to care about either of them, if I'm being honest. And I know they've had a little blood feud going for a while now, but it's not like they ever featured in a key element on their program in any way. All that said, kind of an unfortunate ending there, which really is the bulk of the conversation about this match. Archer ended up going for a moonsault at the end, didn't get a full rotation on it, and he ended up spiking himself right on top of his head, which basically forced him to go home early. So Eddie cradled Archer, and that was that. Not really sure if the plan was to have Archer go over or not, but he definitely looked shaken up there by the end, so I presume they'll probably take precautionary measures and do some testing before they clear Archer to compete again. Definitely could have been a lot worse, but I'm telling you, man, every time I see guys doing gratuitous dives and flips, I keep thinking to myself, the day's going to come. Someone's either going to get brutally injured or outright kill themselves on live TV if they're not careful. I see it on this show, I see it on NXT, I see it in New Japan, I see it all over the place. I literally just watched a months-long G1 tournament come to a screeching halt because Kota Ibushi tried to do a high-risk flip off the top rope and couldn't continue the match. And less than a week later, I'm watching a guy try to do a moonsault and damn near breaking his neck, all for the purpose of trying to pop the fucking crowd. These guys need to cut this shit out now. Injuries in the business are happening way too often today, and most of them are the results of crap like this where guys are doing dangerous-looking shit that doesn't need to be done. It's almost like everyone was taking a bathroom break during the Danielson-Rhodes match, and they're like, all right, time for my get my shit in match, instead of, watching two guys that actually know how to do wrestling work a match and going, oh, so that's how you do it. Who'd have thunk it? Ridiculous. After this, we had the Men of the Year and Dan Lambert promo in the ring. Ethan Page did the bulk of the talking here, basically calling out the Inner Circle guys. And this led to Sammy Guevara coming out for, albeit not the best promo, but he was going up against Ethan here, so it's understandable he was probably going to get outclassed. Anyway, I want to keep moving things along here. Basically told Lambert to state his stipulations so the Inner Circle can get their match with Top Team. And first Lambert says that if the Inner Circle want the 10-man tag, Sammy has to put his TNT title on the line against Ethan Page next week, and only if he wins do they get the match. But if Sammy loses, not only does he lose the belt, but he has to voluntarily leave the Inner Circle forever. So, Sammy accepts the challenge, but he throws in a stip of his own that it first confused the fuck out of me, just out of the way it was delivered, but I think I understood what he was saying. What Sammy said was, when I win, I get to pick the 3 members of Top Team that Inner Circle get to fight. Which initially had me thinking, wait, so this is a 6-man now? But I think what he meant was, he gets to pick the 3 MMA guys to go up against the Inner Circle. So Paige and Scorpio are still part of the match regardless. So apparently Men of the Year and Top Team are 2 separate teams, even though they're all part of one faction. And of course, my immediate thoughts of all this confusion really boils down to the fact that there are way too many fucking people on this roster, but I don't think that's particularly groundbreaking news if you watch the show every week. We had a Jon Moxley skit where he outright admitted he does not care about the tournament, the AEW World title, or the wrestling business, period. Well, good. Step aside, asshole. Let people that actually have a passion for this business into your spot instead of your dumbass hogging the limelight. God, can you believe they put the world title on that clown? We had another bad skit with the Dark Order that, well, quite frankly, even Hangman Page couldn't save. Oh, and by the way, I had to throw this drop in here just for the sheer hilarity of it.
Hey, Colt Cabana, how you doing?
Jungle Boy beat Brandon Cutler in a minute for some reason. Probably the only time you'll actually ever see Jungle Boy in a squash match where he's actually the alpha male in the equation. Although I do think Luchasaurus squashing Cutler would have been more enjoyable. But after that completely pointless deal, Jungle Boy got on a stick and challenged the Elite to come fight him. So, of course, out comes Adam Cole to bait Jungle Boy into fighting him, only for the Beta Bucks to blindside him from behind. So they do the 3-on-1 beatdown all the way up to the top of the stage, at which point the Bucks heave Jungle Boy all the way off the stage to the gimmick tables onto the floor. Keep in mind, this beating went down for probably a good 2 or 3 minutes with nobody running out to make the save for Jungle Boy. And the reason we're given that Luchasaurus couldn't run out for the save was that he was put through a table last week. He was put through a table. You mean like tables that guys go through left and right on the show every week and are no-selling it 5 minutes later? You mean the same table that Malachi Black and Cody went through in the main event and were perfectly fine to continue the match? All right. Now that said, the stage toss looked great. In fact, it looked so great, I almost wish they would have done this angle like a month ago to really milk the injury angle and have Jungle Boy make a big return for the Full Gear pay-per-view to get his revenge. Maybe even do it after the first Adam Cole Jungle Boy match. But, obviously I see the story they're going for here. The Elite's trying to single-handedly dismantle all the babyface challengers one by one. And it is the exact same story they did with Black taking out the Nightmare family just a few weeks ago, but if you can look past that, it's clear the direction they're going. And, I am on record saying that I would like to see Adam Cole and Jungle Boy in a rematch, preferably for the pay-per-view, because I thoroughly enjoyed their TV match a while back. Maybe it'll give Cole a chance to get back on my good side if he disassociates himself from the Bucks for a change. Well, we have arrived to the finale. It is Malachi Black versus Cody 3. And I think the big question we were all asking ourselves going in was, how brutal were the fans going to be towards Cody here? And the answer was, pretty damn brutal. They definitely missed a golden opportunity to throw the weight belt back over the barricade when Cody tossed it into the crowd. If I'm not mistaken, though, I think one of the younglings got a hold of it, and ain't no way you're taking that prize away from him at that point. My notes are all over the place for this. First mistake they made, right out of the gate, was going for the quick lock-up exchange after the opening bell. And I know it only lasted a few seconds, but Cody should have just charged the ramp, shoved the ref aside, and immediately go to town on Black with offensive flurry. That's how I would have booked it. So that was a bad call. Now, yes, Cody did run wild early, and of course the fans exhibited their opinion of this with the Cody sucks chants. They also had a really awkward period outside the ring where the Nightmare family all ended up coming down to stalk Black. 4-on-1 advantage babyfaces, by the way, which is always a no-go. So then, of course, Black goes for the chair under the ring, which brings us to the second mistake here. Why wasn't this match no DQ? Not only did they have both guys actively trying to hit each other with a chair, but they also did a table bump minutes later with Cody hitting a crossroads to Black through the table right in front of the referee. And he didn't call the match off. Stupid. And all the while, Cody and Black are selling on the outside and trying to get under the ring to do juice. And meanwhile, Arn Anderson is just in the ring. He's pacing around, he's flailing his arms up in the air, and of course the ref's just letting it go. Doesn't even bother sending anyone to the back at this point. He's like, all right, fuck it. Guess the rulebook's out the window here. And of course, the reason they had Arn in the ring was so that Andrade could come out to the ramp and point the Glock at Arn, which didn't lead to anything other than Pac running out and beating Andrade's ass all the way to the back. And yeah, I for the record, I guess Pac just presumed Andrade was going to do a run-in, which is why he was already waiting around by the entrance tunnel with his gear on. The art of foreshadowing. Mr. Pac must be a psychic. Oh, actually, no. Hold on. Let me back up for a minute. That's a lie. Sorry. The Andrade angle did lead to something. It led to Andrade's assistant getting spine-busted by Arn in the ring like a dweeb. And then Black misted Arn in the face. And keep in mind, the ref is still letting this all go. Oh, and the fans are booing louder by that point. Almost as if they knew it was coming. Anyway, so fast forward to the end. Both guys are going back and forth, trading near falls, trading moves, the whole 9 yards. Black ends up hitting Black Mass on Cody, but he stumbles into the ropes, so Black can't execute the cover. And about 15 seconds after that, and that is being generous, it may have been less than 15 seconds. After he hits the Black Mass and Cody is dead, he immediately no-sells the move a la John Cena. Black goes for a springboard moonsault, but Cody ducks, hits Black with the suicide dive on the outside, hits a crossroads in the middle of the ring, and hits the double underhook piledriver for the 3. That may have all happened within less than 30 seconds. Which, I don't think you need a brain surgeon there to point out the third flaw here. That being Cody going over in the end. Oh, and you'll be shocked. Shocked, I say, when I tell you that the crowd booed when Cody won. I know. Never saw that coming. Totally out of left field. Well, hopefully my dry humor was enough to provide effective feedback for this. But in all seriousness, was anyone really expecting Cody to job out the Black 3 times? Come on. Really think about that for a minute. Now, am I going to go full-blown crazy here and say, oh my God, they buried Malachi, it's all over? He did a job on TV. It's no different from what they've done with most of their prospective talents or people that they brought over from the competition. They did it with Andrade, they did it with Ruby, they did it with FTR, they did it with Shawn Spears, and now they did it with Malachi Black. And I'm sure the day will come when the same thing will happen with Cole, Punk, and Danielson. Now, would I say this was the right place and right time to job out Malachi? No. Was the story ever really warranted for Black to lose? I mean, from Cody's vantage point, yes. But from the fans' perspective, no, it wasn't. But is this the end of Black as we know it? And he'll never recover, and this is a total burial going forward, blah, blah, blah? No. No, it just solidified that Malachi Black is just another guy now. Nothing out of the ordinary. He's a jag like everyone else on this roster. I don't think you need to read any more into it than that. And meanwhile, Cody's the guy that continues to live in his artificial reality and pretend to portray a character that nobody sees him as. It was the wrong kind of match, with the wrong kind of story, with the wrong kind of character dynamics, with the wrong result. At least from a fan point of view. And, this is a further signification for all the AEW defenders out there to really question whether or not they buy into this whole mantra about AEW always listening to the fans and giving them what they want. You guys want to preach this bullshit like it's the fucking gospel or something? Okay, defend this one. Tell me this is something fans wanted to see. And I'm sure he'll find a way. They all seem to have some kind of bullshit excuse for AEW stupidity. And that's why I'm a straight shooter. I just give you my honest opinion on this show. If they do something great, I make sure to point it out. And if something sucks, I make sure I let you know it. I don't try to come up with lame excuses. I don't try to sugarcoat things. That's just not my flavor. I've watched professional wrestling far too long. I've learned my lessons. You don't defend constant stupidity from organizations. And especially, I would not try to come up with lame excuses when I expect better of a company that wants to claim themselves as credible competition to WWE. Because it's apparent at this point that AEW doesn't want to just be an alternative. They want to be the number one company. They see themselves as a viable competition to WWE. Okay? If that's what you view yourself as, then I expect better. And when you guys do things that I enjoy, I will let you know. But when you guys do stupid things, I'm not gonna sit here and try to make excuses or cover up stories for it. Because that's what the wrestling media does right now. Everything AEW does can be defended in some way, shape, or form. Or that they've earned the fans' trust. That's another excuse that I see a lot of the time. Okay? I don't see that, but I also have different standards. So, I'll leave it at that. Put my closing thoughts on the show here. Some good stuff, some bad stuff. And unfortunately, that is not what you're going to hear from the majority of the wrestling media out there. They're going to try and say this is a fantastic episode of Dynamite, another grand edition, that whole 9 yards, and don't buy into it. Don't feed into it. It's unhealthy what the mainstream wrestling media is doing right now. If you want my honest opinion, and I'm just giving it to you as I see it. There was good stuff. There was bad stuff. Love the opener. Good heat segment with MJF and Sting. I like the Jungle Boy stage angle. I think they could have done a lot more with that. Maybe like a stretcher job or an ambulance angle to really milk the gravity of it. But the actual spot was well done. The Archer Kingston finish was very unfortunate. The women's match sucked because most AEW women's matches suck, especially when they put fucking Penelope Ford in the ring every week just to prove how bad that roster is. And the main event, it all depends on how passionately you hate Cody. I don't have anything against Cody, although his ego is sure holding him back in more ways than one can imagine. But grading it solely as a match, it was overbooked. There's too much crap going on, and it really took away from the overall flow. It's probably a good thing that match aired on TV and not pay-per-view. Because if they tried that exact same match with that exact same finish at the pay-per-view, my God, would people have been rioting. And obviously, you could tell the match was rushed, too, which is probably why they had to get through that finishing sequence so quickly. Which, again, goes back to my whole complaint about AEW booking way too much shit on their show. But again, that's something that you're just not going to hear talked about. They got way too many people. They're trying to spotlight way too many people in way too many angles. You just can't fit the amount of material that they're trying to produce into a 2-hour frame. And the argument that you're going to hear from people is, well, Rampage needs to go 2 hours. Fuck no, it doesn't. What they need to do is they need to sporadically place things. They need to be more consistent with the content that they feature. Put people in those spots that need to be in those spots. Don't try to get everybody over at the same time. Prioritize, delegate, focus. That's what they need to be doing. So, take my opinion as you will, but pretty much another installment of some good stuff, bad stuff AEW programming. It was not great, but it was also not among their worst. All right, so real quick, I wanted to go over this whole by any means necessary card fluctuation thing. In fact, this whole episode of PowerrrSurge was very puzzling to me for a variety of reasons. So first off, the show was taped as of last night, and apparently it's going to be airing on Fight TV this Tuesday, so I will end up reviewing the actual show for next Monday's podcast. However, apparently that card has shifted around a couple things in the last few days, and I'm not particularly sure how and why this was done, but I'm going to do my best to run it down. So initially, I had thought the card was booked as Trevor Murdoch defending the NWA World title against the Pope and Nick Aldis wrestling Tom Latimer. Now apparently, the card is Trevor Murdoch teaming with Nick Aldis to face Tom Latimer and Chris Adonis, and the Pope is now wrestling Colby Corino for some reason. I had also presumed that Camille was defending her women's title against Melina, which, judging how they've been booking the show, seemed like the logical match to book for the pay-per-view. Now apparently the match is Camille defending her title against some chick named Kenzie Page. I have no idea who Kenzie Page is. I have never seen her on this show before as far as my recollection goes, and I have no idea why that match is happening, but lo and behold, it's very baffling to me. Which brings me to whatever in the hell this episode of PowerrrSurge was designed to do. My notes are all over the place with this show, but I'm going to do my best to briefly run down some of the lowlights, because if I'm being blunt, most of the show was a low light. Okay, so first off, apparently they shot an angle to hype up the Aldis Murdoch versus Latimer Adonis tag match by booking a match between Aldis and some schlub in a dress shirt and tie over in Poland. And not only did they have Aldis lose the match via DQ, but they tried to cover it up as blaming Adonis in the situation, when the reality of the situation is that Adonis ran interference on the apron. He took the referee while the businessman cosplaying as a wrestler snuck in the back door with a briefcase. Aldis kicked him in the gut, levied him with the gimmick in plain view of the referee, and that was how the match was thrown out. And they tried to rationalize this as Adonis being at fault when Aldis was the dipshit that used the gimmick right in front of the referee that Adonis never introduced at the match at any point. Mind you, I'm not making a single lick of this up. If you don't believe me, go watch the shows right now. It's on streaming services. This is a real thing that happened. All of this to try and draw last-minute attention to a tag match that was changed at the last minute for reasons still unbeknownst to me. So you go try and make sense out of that one. Elsewhere on the program, they had a Tim Storm, Tom Latimer dark match that I ended up having to put on mute because I had to once again be subjected to Velvet Sky and Austin Idol bicker back and forth on commentary the whole time. And there's nothing wrong with the match, but if the idea is to hype up Latimer and Adonis against Aldis and Murdoch, why is Tim Storm in there? Wouldn't a better idea be to put Storm in the tag match then instead of Murdoch? Well, apparently not, because according to the updated By Any Means Necessary card that I snuck a peek at over the weekend, Tim Storm is apparently booked for that show. And who is he scheduled to face? He's wrestling James Storm in a bunkhouse match. Excuse me? Where in the hell did that come from? I thought James Storm was being booked to go after the national title, which, correct me if I'm wrong, currently held by Chris Adonis, right? But now he's wrestling Tim Storm in a bunkhouse match, of all things, after Tim just did a clean job on this show, and oh my God, my brain hurts. But the brain aneurysms didn't stop there, because after that match, Joe Galli did a interview, I guess, with the artist formerly known as Billy Corgan, who has now adopted the professional full name of William Patrick Corgan. And he laid out some special steps for the pay-per-view. And firstly, he kind of ran down the whole backstory with Camille and Melina, and somehow all circled back to him announcing that he's making the Camille Kenzie Page match 2 out of 3 falls, because I guess he wants Kenzie to have a standout performance or something. Of course, the only thing running through my head at the time was, oh great, 2 out of 3 falls, so that means the match is probably going to go on twice as long as it probably should. And aside from that, he did run down the Murdoch Aldis versus Strictly Business tag match, as well as the Jax Dane Crimson Cage match, which, looking back at the show now, I think is one of the only long-term stories they've actually been building up on the show consistently that hasn't actually altered from the card in any way, shape, or form. And if you're wondering if there were any further elaborations on those special steps, nope, that was pretty much it. Just the women's match is going to be 2 out of 3 falls because reasons. And then they close out the show by re-airing the Layla Hirsch-Camille title match from the Empower pay-per-view. One, I guess, to hype up the upcoming all-women's Empower show that nobody's going to watch. And 2, I guess, to build hype for Camille's title match, which, I mean, alright. Still doesn't explain why Camille's wrestling a random chick that we've never seen on the show before. You know, and for everyone out there that's going to say, well, look her up, smartass. You have a search engine on your computer. Okay, first of all, fuck you. And second off, no. That's not how we do effective marketing television here in the real world. You want me to pay money to see a pay-per-view match? I expect to be given a rhyme and a reason to want to see that match. You want me to pay for a Kenzie Page match? Cool. Put her on the TV show. Book her to win squash matches. Give her promos. Develop her character. Set the stage for her challenging Camille to a title match. Put him in an altercation. Don't sit there and spend several weeks building up a program with Camille and Melina, only to turn around last minute and book a random women's title match at the pay-per-view with no build or story, and then expect me to A, be invested, or B, pay money to see it. I'm very much aware that I have the ability to do a quick Google search on Kenzie Page if I so desired. That's not the point. The point is, I was given the impression that based on the consistency of the television show, I was going to be seeing Melina versus Camille. If I was given any insight or reason to care about Kenzie Page, I would have seen that reflected on the NWA shows. Or God forbid, have them take the time to air a video package or a promo pre-tape with her. Instead of re-airing a previous pay-per-view match with another chick that's not even booked for the show, Layla Hirsch, why didn't you bother taking the last 5 or so minutes to introduce me a little bit to Kenzie Page? Give me her backstory. Give me her ring credentials, her training, her skill sets, her idols, her character. Is that like not wrestling 101 when you're introducing new characters on the show? And no, Corgan doing an interview with Joe Galli and talking her up for 2 minutes, that's not enough. That's laziness. So, I mean, to say I was frustrated after watching this show would be barely brushing the surface. More so, it's just due to the fact that, on top of the NWA shows being relatively enjoyable over the last few weeks, me thinking they had a clear-cut direction they were going for the pay-per-view, to not only turn around and shift the card around last minute, but in essence not provide a rationale for doing so, that left me completely bewildered. Like, if the idea is, well, we want to save some of these matches for bigger shows, okay, that's fine, but explain that to me. Tell me that you're putting the matches off. Because right now, I don't know when NWA's next pay-per-view is, after this By Any Means Necessary show. Is it at the end of the year? Is it the beginning of 2022? Like, at least say this blow-off match is not going to happen by any means necessary. This is going to happen at whatever pay-per-view we're building up afterwards. Like, if Pope's not going to wrestle Trevor Murdoch for the belt, fine. But then you have to do a better job explaining why he's wrestling a match against Colby Corino with no build-up. If Camille's putting her title match with Melina, setting it for a later date, fine. But tell me why I should care about her wrestling a random 2 out of 3 falls match with Kenzie Page with no build-up. If Aldis and Latimer are saving their blow-off match for down the road, fine. But tell me how you logically get to Trevor and Aldis teaming to face Adonis and Latimer when the bulk of the story has been about Adonis and Latimer attacking Aldis and Tim Storm, all the while Tim is apparently wrestling James Storm at the pay-per-view when James Storm was previously preoccupied with Judas and going after the national title, which, now that I think about it, why wouldn't you have James Storm pair up with Nick Aldis if he's going after the national title? Because Chris Adonis is in that match. Like, this whole thing is so confusing. Like I mentioned earlier, the only feud they've actually spent time logically building and culminating is the cage match with Jack Dane and Crimson, which should be a good match, and I expect Dane to go over there, specifically if he's going to be the next guy in line for a title shot. But somehow within the span of the last week, they've completely disbanded with Pope versus Trevor, Camille versus Melina, and Nick Aldis versus Tom Latimer, with Jack Dane and Crimson being the main selling point. And now it is Dane versus Crimson as the main draw, and a bunch of lesser preliminary stuff that doesn't seem to matter a whole lot. Like, I guess the Murdoch Aldis versus Strictly Business tag match is a sort of secondary draw, but they really didn't do that match any favors by making Aldis look like a complete goof in that Poland match they aired. I still have no idea what that was supposed to accomplish. So, I'll watch the show and recap it next week, but to say I'm going in with much lower expectations now, putting it mildly. Overall, very confusing show, and one that really left me in complete bewilderment when it was over. And with that said, that'll wrap things up for this week. Guys, if you want to stay posted with FSWR content in the future, be sure to subscribe, comment, and rate the video for me. As always, you can check the show out on Rumble. Link for that is always in the description. And if you haven't done so, make sure you check out my article, Content at the Chairshot. This coming Friday will probably be the last NXT review I do for a while, and at that point, I will use that to reformat the material that we cover on that show each week. And again, like I mentioned at the beginning, we'll prioritize the Monday shows, the recaps of Rampage, NWA Power, and weekend pay-per-view events. And for the Friday show, we'll can NXT all together, and the focus of that show will be on AEW Dynamite, NWA World Championship Wrestling Studio shows, and World Class Championship Wrestling retro reviews. So the NWA shows will begin 1985, first week in November, which is the first episode they have updated in the Peacock library. And for World Class, we're going to begin in November of 1982. And that was right before the kickstart of the Freebirds Von Erich program, which would be a pretty good place to start. And that'll probably end up being a more enjoyable use of my time going forward instead of moaning and complaining about a D- level OVW product that, let's be frank, shouldn't even be airing on national cable television at this point with how bad it is. Plus, the classic content reviews will give me a reason to actually utilize my fucking Peacock subscription for a change. So, at least I'll be getting my money's worth. Until Friday, take care all. Peace out.